Hi kids, I miss you guys and I'm sad we can't be at church, but I'm excited that we can at least bring church to where you are at your house. And we get to do the 5th week of our series of being a good neighbor. And if you guys remember, our memory verse is in 1 Peter 3:8, and it says, "So all of you should live together in peace, try to understand each other, love each other like brother and sister, be kind and humble." So this week we're on the 5th part of that verse, and we're going to talk about being humble. How many of you guys know what being humble means? It's kind of one of those weird words that we don't hear very much. Maybe you hear adults saying it more, but being humble is basically the opposite of being proud. And being proud is when you think you're really, really great at something, so much so that you think somebody else is not as good. And it's good to have talents and know that you're good at stuff, but when you put others down because of it, that's what we don't want to do. And so today I want to share a story with you that we find in the Old Testament about two people. One of them was usually always pretty humble, and another one was not. And so this story is about King Saul and David. This is the same David from the story of David and Goliath. Okay, so after David killed Goliath, he went on to serve King Saul in the army. David was really, really good in the army. I mean, he killed a bunch of enemies for Saul, and Israel loved him for it. They were so happy that they had David on their side because he was successful at anything he tried to do. But he didn't make anybody else feel bad for not being as good as he was. And King Saul started to get really, really jealous that King David, well, he was the king, right? He was anointed the king, but he wasn't serving as king yet. And Saul was so jealous that David was so good that he eventually tried to kill David for like a long, long time. You guys might remember we talked about this last month too. Well, one time after killing so many of Philistines, David came home and they celebrated him. And the people of Israel were singing that Saul struck down his thousands and David his 10,000s. And that made Saul really, really angry. He really didn't like the fact that everybody recognized David's talent and that he didn't have the same talent. He was prideful and David was being humble. And Saul eventually, like I said, was trying to kill David. And so the Lord doesn't want us to be prideful. He wants us to be humble. And that means that the Bible actually says that we should think of others as better than ourselves. And it's important to, even though we all have these different talents, to not put down other people who might not have the same talents, but lift them up and encourage them in the things that they are good at. And not be like Saul, to where we let jealousy and anger like rule our lives and make us make bad choices, because that's what jealousy and anger make us do. I think that's really why God wants us to be humble, because when we have pride and we let ourselves make bad choices because we're jealous or angry, then that eventually makes us sin, and God doesn't like sin. So where you are, I know we can't have a discussion about this and we can't talk because you're watching me on video, but where you are, I want you to think about the story. And I want you to think about how it must have been hard for Saul to be older and be the king and have somebody that was younger, and all of your people think that he's wonderful. And I mean, we have to think that had to have felt bad for King Saul. But he could have managed it differently. He could have made better choices and not responded the way he did. And what are some things that maybe your best friend is good at that you're not? That sometimes make you feel bad. And you have a choice when those things happen. How are you going to respond? Are you going to be humble, or are you going to react with jealousy or anger? And then what about when you're recognized, or you get a reward at school, or you do something really good at home and your mom or dad cheers you on and is really, really thankful of what you did. Are you going to make your brothers and sisters feel bad because they didn't do the same thing? Or are you going to be humble and encourage everybody else around you to make good choices as well? Those are the choices that we have. And since we believe in God, we have to make sure that we're making those choices and that we stay humble. But before we leave, let's repeat our memory verse again, because this is the last week we're going to have this one. Okay? It says, "So all of you should live together in peace, try to understand each other, love each other like brother and sister, be kind and humble." 1 Peter 3:8. So remember, the first week of this series, we talked about living together in peace. The second week of this series, we talked about understanding each other. And the third week of this series, we talked about loving each other. And then last week, we talked about being kind. And today, we talked about being humble. So we're going to close out this series, and I can't wait to share with you what God is going to teach us next week.